everyone, my name's Ella Tyler and I am from the company Lead 50/50. We're a company that accredits organizations who want to close their gender pay gap and get real equality in the workplace. And basically we go in and we audit a company, we look at their policies and processes. We do a people survey and then we come up with an insights and recommendations report. So it's for those companies that want to see real change. And my background is that I started off in corporate life working for big blue chip companies in the UK. And then I set up my own business once I had children because I found, as I'm sure many of you do here, that working corporate life is not conducive to having a family. So I set up my own business where I was my own boss and I didn't have to ask anyone if I could leave early to pick my kids up. And I did that for 15 years very successfully, built up a language school. And then I sold that on just during the pandemic and I'm now focusing on my passion, which is gender equality at work. And that's how I find myself speaking to you wonderful bunch of people across the pond. And I am absolutely thrilled to introduce today's panel, which is part of the Father's Friday summer series. And so grateful to be invited by Brian. Thank you so much. As a mother, I am grateful for organizations such as Fathering Together, bringing together such a collection of thought leaders, disruptors, and organizations who are all working to change our perspective on how dads engage with their families, communities, and workplace. It is so important to keep talking about it because only then can we make real change. So today's topic focuses on mental health for men and the pressures that they feel having to be the main breadwinner. We all know that the current, leadership paradigm doesn't serve most people. A very, very small minority of people thrive, but many, many suffer. And that's why it's so important. And I cannot underscore the importance of talking about mental health for men and the pressures that they face. Many, many times I have seen this play out in the work that I've been doing in this space, and I'm thankful that I've been invited again. So I hope you enjoyed this session, and hopefully I'd love to meet some of you in the future in real life. So enjoy.
Welcome to today's Father's Friday panel. Father's Friday is a program of fathering together created in partnership with dozens of for-profit, community-based organizations and individuals dedicated to improving the mental health of dads, families, and community. Today's topic is dads and financial stress. I'm your host and moderator, Paul Sullivan, founder of the Company of Dads, the first media company and community platform aimed at lead dads and those men who are the go-to parents, whether they work full-time, part-time, or devote all their time to their families. Before launching the Company of Dads in 2022, I was a business columnist at the New York Times, where I wrote about personal finance and covered many of the topics we're going to discuss today. I'm joined by some amazing panelists and fathers to discuss how best to reduce financial stress for fathers. In alphabetical order, we have Michael Danucci, who manages over $1 billion with his sister and nephew at Merrill Lynch out of the West Hartford, Connecticut office. Mike's core clients are doctors, lawyers, executives, and people who have worked and saved their entire careers. He is a father of 2. Then we have Robert Farrington, founder of the College Investor, which he created in 2009 while finishing his MBA. It exists to help millennials get out of student loan debt and get on with their investing life. Robert is also the father of 2 children, and don't feel sorry for him. He lives in San Diego, California, the sunniest place in America. And last but not least, Stephen Israel, an executive director at JP Morgan Private Bank in Charlotte. As a private banker for decades, Stephen has worked with some of America's most financially successful families. Before going into finance, Stephen played in the NFL for 10 years. He has 4 growing children, and he's coming to us live from Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you, gentlemen.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Before I get to my first question, let me remind the viewers that these panels have been pre-recorded, and you can find additional information and resources at fathersfriday.org, including joining the Father's Friday newsletter to get additional updates as the campaign continues. Now, on to the first question. I asked each of you to be on this panel because you're advising people at three different levels of wealth. Robert is getting people right as they're coming out of college. They're dealing with their student loan debts. They're sort of getting on their feet. Michael is taking some people 30s, 40s, 50s who have had success in their careers or about to have success in their careers. And of course, Stephen, as a private banker, you're often dealing with people worth, tens of millions of dollars. But, I know this from my previous life at the New York Times. It's something we talk about at the company Dads. No matter where you are in your life or how much or how little wealth you have, we all have problems. So let's just start by going around in reverse order from how I introduce you. So Stephen first, and ask the same question. What's the greatest cause of financial stress for dads, and why?
My opinion is it depends on, for example, the state that family is in. And for dads, and most dads, if you're a dad and obviously you have, whether it's one kid or five and you're married, uh, most dads are dads because they want a family. And a dad's number one priority is to take care of his family. And so my opinion, and being in the circles that I'm in, whether it's here at the private bank or it's in the boardrooms or in some of the boards that I'm on, or it's at one of my kids' events, talking to the dads that's there with their kids. It's not being able, the stress is not being able to take care of something that you're looking to accomplish for your family, or specifically, obviously, one of your kids or all your kids. And so that's why it's highly important, regardless of, we're talking about being a husband or being a dad or your career. It all comes back to the planning. The proper planning is going to help prevent the problems in the future for you.
Yeah, good, thank you. Now, Robert, you're hitting people coming right out of college. It's going to be a couple of years before they get married, but surely they stay in touch with you. You're a young dad yourself. What are some of the things that you've found cause, dads, financial stress, and why?
Yeah, I mean, it very much echoes what Steven just kind of said. And I kind of view it as the fear of not having enough, or the fear of not being able to provide. And so I kind of envision it, and I hear it being said is, I look at my bank account and I don't know if I have enough, or I'm seeing these bills coming in and I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to pay them or afford them. And so as a dad, I mean, kind of Steven said it, is like, you're kind of thinking that you are the provider. You're supposed to take care of your family. And so looking at that bank account, looking at those statements, and really understanding, like, do I have enough income this month to provide, or do I need to do more? Or do I need to cut? And I think, there's a lot of stress that comes when you're living very close to, financial balance, or even having a deficit every month. So looking at that bank account and really worried about it is, I think, what dads really stress about.
Interesting. And Michael, you're saying, I know you have some clients building wealth in their 30s and 40s, but when you're talking to that core client, that core executive client of yours who's in his 50s, done pretty well, has kids, maybe on paper looks great, but what's causing that person, that dad, stress in his financial life?
I think anyone has a finite amount of resources, whether you're coming out of school, or even some of the people that Stephen deal with, all the way up the ladder. No matter what, you're allocating, your income and your assets accordingly. And a lot of the people that we run into is balancing, that want for a major purchase, maybe, that they want to buy a second home someday, but that is a competing interest with paying for their kids' college or saving for retirement. So I think in terms of, from a stress perspective, it's working, with your spouse or significant other, and thinking about your family as a whole and what's most important to you, and coming up with a list of priorities and listing those priorities, whether it's, retirement savings, security, an upcoming major purchase, paying for college. We have clients who also are very charitably inclined. And how do they allocate money accordingly to those different pockets? I think, and that's the guidance and help that we can give, when we're working with clients, to maybe alleviate that anxiety of where they're allocating what is a finite amount of resources, no matter how much money you have.
Yeah. Now, all three of you guys touched on this in one way or the other about plans and the importance of having a financial plan. I remember for my first book, I talked to these guys up at West Point, the military academy for the Army, and one of the guys said, yeah, plans fail, but planning is everything. And they took a very active approach to how they would, prepare those cadets when they get out there. And I think of, how so much has changed from COVID. I mean, I'm sure we used to always meet in person. You meet with your financial advisor in person, you sit down, he'd have a nice book for you. And now it's all a lot more dynamic. We can go online, we can even see sort of real time, or, have we saved enough? Are we spending too much here? Did this drop in value? And that makes the plan, theoretically a little more active if somebody is going to engage in it. But, Stephen, from your perspective, with the folks you're working with, they have not only do they have a plan for their investments, they surely have an estate plan. They have plans for, allocating, resource to philanthropy, but life changes. How do you keep them, even at the highest level of wealth, how do you keep them, on track and focused on that plan? If not, not day to day, but, at least quarterly or not annually, to keep them, making sure that they're doing, what they wanted to do with that plan.
Great question. It comes back to communication. It's funny, you earlier before we started taping, you mentioned my former life in playing in the NFL, and that's what that is. A lot of people see the game and they're excited, but at the end of the day, it's between the ears on what's going on. Can you execute the plan and the coverages? But more specifically, are you communicating? Winning teams, whether it's a family team unit or whether it's NFL, regard or employees working together, winning teams, you'll find the highest level of communication coming across and that's involved. And so specifically to answer that question, communicating. Okay, kids are out of college now. College 529, check, we're done. With the balance that was left, it gets pushed and we're going to restart it for the grandkids. It's always communication. Then it comes into, oh, the company was valued much higher than I originally thought. Looks like we have additional funds that's going to be there. And I mean a lot of funds. I've always wanted to have my own family office. Can you help me with that? What does that look like? Again, communication, bringing the right subject matter experts into the equation. So, regardless if we're talking family office level or down to the example I mentioned with the College 529, you have to communicate and it all has to be put into the plan. And at the end of the day, what do you want?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, I'm gonna give you a quick follow-up, Stephen, because I remember it reminded me of a story you told me. You and I've known each other for years, and we talked, and I think you playing with New Orleans at the time, but you told me the story where you had a plan for everything, and we talk about fathers as providers, fathers as doing it, but you were playing in the NFL. You played 10 years in the NFL, but I remember you telling me that before you would go to practice, you had as part of your daily plan dropping your kids off at school, like making sure you got to see your kids, because you know what, you may be practicing late into the night, or they may get home, or you may have to travel for a game, but you always, as much as you could. And talk to me how, when you think about a plan with some of the dads you're working with, how you help them plan for, the things that matter, their kids, their grandkids, their partners.
Yeah, yeah, good question. So the listeners will understand specifically. My family's kind of spread out a little bit. I'm married to my college girlfriend, and we started our family early. So my oldest daughter is a graduate from Columbia University, and now today is 31 years old. However, though, my youngest daughter, and I have four kids, three girls and one boy. My youngest daughter is only 18, and she's a freshman at LSU. So I tell you that is because there were days when I'm dropping my oldest daughter off and taking her to school. I have NPR on, where when she gets out the car, then obviously I turn on the Disney tunes for my youngest daughter. My point I'm making though is the plan of why NPR, because I would always know when someone is on and they're going to bring up the housing boom and the real estate situation. And that was my time, because kids hear their parents all the time, but it's so important for them to hear other adults. So I would take the nuggets from NPR and use and build off of it and use it for planting seeds in my daughter's head. So now when she comes home from school and she's talking about what they went over in her business class, I'm able to implement the stuff from NPR that I wanted to share about mortgages and specifically how mortgages work. And so it's all connected. And then what happens is, because the younger kid heard you telling the older sibling, then after at some time they want to learn. They want to say, "Hey, can you explain to me what you were explaining to Avery about houses? I didn't know that. I thought we paid rent." I'm like, "No, no, we don't. We don't pay rent. It's we pay a mortgage. If you're in an apartment, you pay a rent. So it's at different levels."
I love the story, Stephen, because I have 3 daughters, and I'm seeing how you're talking about a mortgage on a house, and I can imagine like my youngest daughter saying, "So I can get a princess castle? How do you get a mortgage on a princess castle?" Because that when you bring in the Disney with the NPR, it gets it all a little wonky. Robert, think about you're talking about planning, for some of the folks you're working with, like with the college investor. Surely some of them went in eyes wide open and said, "Okay, I'm going to have to take on a little bit of student loan debt to pay for my education, and I'll get a job later on and pay it off." But that's a plan, and those plans, as I gave in the sort of West Point example, they don't always succeed. Sometimes they fail. So when you talk about planning with the people you're really working with, I'm going to be a wild guess here that some percentage of them come to you in a state of crisis, or come to the college investor and say, "How do I fix this?" How do you get people back? If you haven't been able to keep them on their plan, how do you get them back on that plan so they get rid of that college debt and they can start, saving? So one day they become, clients of Michael or Stephen.
Absolutely. I mean, we kind of talked about this before the show, and sadly, the answer is we need to take a step back before the plan even exists. And I spent a lot of time talking about getting organized financially in terms of like, let's talk about what you own, what you owe, what's coming in, and what's going out. And I like to keep it very simple, because we can't even make a good plan until we know what's even going on in the situation. And that's where I find a lot of young adults and young families really need to start, is getting organized financially in terms of just knowing what their student loans are, knowing, what their car loan is, what they pay in rent. And then also, what's your income look like? And is it variable? And what can we expect every month? And then let's look at all these expenses. But the hard part is that we also need to have people do this in a way that they're going to stick to. Because why do people fall off a plan? Well, a lot of times it's because they haven't built the habit, and it's not something that they're like used to. So, today we have apps and spreadsheets and tools, but if you're not a technology person, well, maybe you need to go back to a planner and a calendar and like write it down on paper. Maybe, the technology is something you want. So finding an app that works for you, or maybe you're a spreadsheet person, like getting that spreadsheet together. So I like to help people get organized, but get organized in a way that works for them and their own behavior and their psychology. And then once we know what everything is, we can start pulling different levers and building a plan on that.
God, Robert, if only I could have more Excel sheets in my life. I think that would make it,
well, we found the Excel junkie here on the show,
and just a PowerPoint. Like if every family meal could start with a PowerPoint. I mean,
oh man.
Michael, we're kind of, with Robert and Stephen, is sort of, two different spectrums, where, Steve, you value a company and you have excess money and you want to start a foundation, and in Stephen's case, that example, Robert talking about how to keep people on that plan, find a way that makes it work for them. But when you have, clients who, again, on paper should be, completely fine, but perhaps they have lifestyle expenses that outpace their savings, or those lifestyle expenses or their desires for additional homes or car, whatever, may be throwing off their plan. How do you help them as their advisor to get back, or to realize like the impact that their actions are having for those dads without, losing them as a client, to be that, advisor that those dads need to keep their finances in line so that when they're 65 and, aren't working anymore, they'll be okay and still be able to enjoy, their life as they're saving.
Yeah, I mean, like, they were talking about, we start with a net worth. So you want to look at, your assets relative to your liabilities and how you're like I go back to the first part, how you're allocating your resources. And everyone that we work with, we do not work with clients that do not have a financial plan. We demand if we're going to start working them. And it used to be, 30 years ago, you'd go see an advisor and, here's, a couple $100,000 or 100,000 or whatever it might be, and invest this for me. And I'll come back when I need it. We need a roadmap. And what I've told people is, we're probably all old enough to remember when you were on an airplane, and you were going from where I'm sitting in West Hartford, to, either to see Stephen in North Carolina or to Robert out in San Diego. You look out the side of the window, but you didn't necessarily know where you were. You didn't necessarily, there was some anxiety. We talk about stress and anxiety. And I think, and I used an example with someone the other day that now when you're on an airplane, you can actually hit a button to show where you are on that journey, where you started, where you want to go, and where you are on that journey. It's just not about looking out to the side and trying to earmark, maybe kind of where I am. That plane can actually tell you exactly where you are on that journey and how that plane is taking you from point A to point B. So I use that as an example of how important a financial plan is. It needs to be flexible and changeable. Storms can come along, blow you off course, and the pilot needs to tack that plane one way or the other to get you eventually to your destination. And that's what we do with clients, is to say, look, you're getting a little off course here. Your destination is you want to go over here, but you're spending money, but you're not saving enough over here. So I think in terms of that, a financial plan, when we talk about dads and stress and anxiety are very closely related, I think. So to alleviate that anxiety, to alleviate that stress, having that financial plan and making sure that, hey, if you want to get, from this direction to that direction, these are the things you have to do, to get there. And the plan isn't just a plan and then it's done. I mean, I always tell people a financial plan is good for about a week because things in life change regularly. It's that planning process that's really important, that you've got to be meeting with your advisor. You've got to be updating that plan. You've got to make sure that you're tacking in the right direction to eventually end up to the destination that you want to belong to, that you want to get to.
I love the image you created of the, the line on the plane as you're flying. So at a certain point when one of your clients has, orders too many like cheese plates and one too many bourbons, is that the sort of, continue the analogy that you got to correct that,
Pull them back.
Pull them back.
As long as the pilot isn't having too many bourbons, we should be able to get in the right direction. But you're absolutely right, Paul. That's what we do.
To continue, airline to continue to beat this metaphor to death. We talk about turbulence. Sometimes you're in a plane, it gets a little bumpy. You stay the course. I'll leave it up to you guys. All three of you will answer the next question, but whoever wants to go first. But we're talking. We're recording this at the beginning of May. So far this year, 3 banks have failed. The Federal Reserve, as we're talking now, they could have already raised rates again. They've raised rates substantially. We don't know if we're in a recession or not. Some people are adamant that we're in it. Some people think that we're gonna skirt by without it. But this is a lot of noise. And there's a great book that came out a couple years ago with the title of The Signal and the Noise. And the signal was what you wanted to follow. That was your sort of North Star of how you're going to go about it. And the noise is all the stuff that could possibly, distract you from that. So when you talk to dads and they come to you, and this is the, people always call, I'm sure, when they're worried, when things are going wrong, when there's an area of concern, how do you keep them on course when there is, noise that is understandably upsetting? We those of us old enough to remember 2008 think, oh my goodness, are we gonna go back to some version of that? So how do you keep them, on course, looking at that signal when there's so much noise?
I'll start off by simply staying the course. What you said, staying the course with your plan, and Michael alluded to it, and also Robert regarding our clients. There are clients because of really mainly two things. And these guys have been in the business longer than I have, and I'm sure they would agree. It starts with A, they like you. That's one, they like you. But B, and probably just as important, if not more important, they trust you. So
Yeah.
because they became your clients in the first place, they like and trust you, they've given you a ticket to speak into their lives. That means they're gonna ask you for advice, and sometimes when they don't see it necessarily coming, they're gonna listen to your advice. And so helping them stay on the course and having that plan that Mike and Robert also alluded to helps that. And then you need examples like the example that Michael gave, staying the course and getting from A to B. And if you want to get to C, you took a left turn right at B, a little too far left. Let's get back on track. And then giving them examples and information of how to get back on track. And just to bring up the kids again, with dads, don't try to do it all yourself. Number one. Number two, have your wife involved, obviously, in the plan, and she knows the plan inside and out, just like you do. So it's a team approach. And then the second thing is your kids, they're not going to always be 5 or 8 or 7. You have different goals and different levels of things implemented for them to take ownership. And things change dramatically once they're old enough to get a job. Then once they have a job, then all that planning and all the team meetings and all the family huddles that you did and the things, the example that I use, for example, from NPR and like talking about mortgages, all that stuff is going to come to fruition. And for me, because my kids are grown, except for just the daughter that's a freshman, all that stuff is paid off, and I've seen it all come to fruition. I've had a kid buy a house, and she was so happy going through the process because she remembered the stuff we talked about, and the decisions they made when they're working. Use it now; it's their money. I'm not giving them any allowance or the check. The job where they work, they're receiving a check. So all those stories and all that planning, it makes your life so much easier as time goes on if you stay the course.
That's a great point, Stephen. Michael, Robert, who wants to take this next about getting through,
Yeah, I'll just say, like, I always like to help people reframe on knowing what they can control and knowing what they can't control. And I think this is like a broader conversation of media and everything today, but I think there's just so much noise out there and so many opinions and so many takes and, social media and all of it. And it's really important for dads and families to remember, like, what actually impacts you. Do any of these bank failures impact you if you're below the FDIC insurance limits? Do any of these change your long-term plan if you're invested in, low-cost index funds in your 401k? Like, what actually impacts you, and or what can you control? Or are you just getting your mind caught up in like what you're hearing and you think the world's going to end and all of it's going to come down? And it's like, okay, we can even have that conversation. What does that actually mean for you today and tomorrow, for your family and your pocketbook if that happens? And helping people kind of realize and walk through these plans that, like, well, it probably doesn't. And so, like, let's stick to the plan. Let's keep this, but really helping people reframe and put a lens and take some personal accountability on the choices that they can actually make in their own lives versus all the world and the media and everything else.
That's a good point, Robert. I was actually, sorry, Mike, I'll let you go in a second. Robert, I was talking to this guy, every week at the Company Dads, we have a feature called the Lead Dad of the Week. And the whole point is just to highlight different men who are doing this. And the guy this week, a guy named Ajit Jain, who works in finance. And I asked him to sort of reflect back upon, what he would tell his self before he became a dad, sort of go back 10 years, the pre-dad version of himself. And one of the things he said that stuck with me was, if you could tell that person anything, it was, when your mind goes to that worst case scenario, 99% of the time, it doesn't happen. 99% of the time, it's not as bad as you think it is. Now, the flip side of it is 99% of the time, of course, it's probably not as good as you think it is. But it's a great point that you make there, Robert, about control. Because if we focus on the things that we ourselves can control, well, we have, some sort of agency. We don't feel listless, out there. But, at the flip side of this, I was talking to a friend today, whose son, two of his three sons work at one of the banks that recently failed. And so he's quite worried about them is what's going to happen. But, the upside for him is he said, well, they're young, they don't have kids, they'll bounce back and they'll get an amazing life lesson, now early on. Michael, what were you were about to say something? I cut you off, so I apologize for that.
No, it's great. And I was going to kind of build off of, what Robert was saying is control what you can control. And I go back in terms of the planning. And, what we usually will do for clients, especially say someone in their 40s that's saying, okay, I want to retire when I'm 64 years old, and this is what I'm saving. Well, we can create a target rate of return that they need based on their savings pattern to get them where they're going. So we'll always, if clients call with anxiety, or stress with regards to what's happening in the market, which absolutely over the years, that's as an advisor when you make your money, to be there as a partner for your clients. We will go back to that plan and say, okay, here is your target rate of return. So are you calling me with market timing because you're worried about the market continuing to go down? Or is this a change in your risk tolerance? Because as we go through the life cycle, someone in their 60s, will have a different risk tolerance with how much volatility they want in their portfolio. So we'll go back and say to say to a partner that we're working with, to say, look, we've identified, that you need a 6.5, 7%, rate of return. We're not going to get that, sitting in cash and current bond rates. We need, a part of the portfolio where we are taking that risk. So one thing that we will talk about is, especially when the markets decline, is everything is mathematically built. What can we control? We can control your asset allocation. Well, if we've identified that 70% of your money needs to be in stock to get potentially that rate of return over the next 15 years, and now the markets have fallen, only 60% of your money is in stock, we need to counterintuitively take money from where you want to put it and actually take it from there and put it to the asset that you actually want to sell right now. So it's counterintuitive, but it's what we can control. We can control the asset allocation. We can control your financial plan. We can't control what's happened to the markets, but we can control our behavior of the things that we can do to give you the highest probability of success to achieve those goals and objectives that you have. So I love the idea of what Robert was saying earlier, is going back to what we can control, not necessarily all the noise and what we're hearing within the marketplace and what's driving, risk assets up or down.
Yeah. Stephen, you touched on something that I want to drill down a bit more on. And you said, it's important for fathers to make sure that the mom, that their wife knows the plan, forward and backwards, knows the plan just as well as they do. And of course, the old school way, the 1980s, Wall Street way is, the guy came in, made all the decisions, or as Michael said, gave you $100,000 and said, invest it in, 7 stocks. I'll come back to you. And that, of course, that's not the world we live in. Now, fortunately, it's the different world we live in for the better. But how do you make sure both to, take some of the pressure off of dads, but also to make sure that the couple, if they're married, that the couple is making decisions together? How, Stephen, do you start that process to make sure that, at the very least, the husband and wife are aware of the plan and going through this, with you, and then perhaps when the time is right, that the adult children get brought in to have some sort of idea as to what mom and dad are doing.
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I brought that up like that is because my wife is a stay-at-home mom, and my kids realize that I was the breadwinner and I'm the one that's working, and mom is staying home with the kids, and not to devalue what that position is. It's a lot. It's the biggest job you can have, right? She's responsible for her part of raising my kids, and I wanted them to understand that mom knows a lot about this subject. Also, we're on the same team. It's not like, well, mom didn't agree with dad, or we make sure we're on the same team. So when we deliver the game plan, they receive it well, and it's not like they half receive or half understood. That's one. And then two, something could happen to me. What if not I die, but I'm sick and I can't talk? Does the plan not get delivered because dad can't talk, or you see what I'm saying? So if we're on the same page and we're delivering the same message, obviously within the same family meeting we're having, it also helps for examples. Just like dad had a paper route and worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken in high school, mom had a job too. She just worked at Armstrong as an admin at Grandpop's company where he worked, but also she worked at Arby's in in the drive-through, and but she also worked at J.C. Penney's. So it's important for our kids to understand that we're not asking you to do something, or we're not educating and going over a plan that we already didn't execute ourselves. And when you add in, hey, this is what dad did, and this is how I did it. Also, listen to mom's story and what she did and how she saved her check, because it's important for them to understand the full picture. For another example, well, dad, how did you save for your college tuition? Well, I didn't have it because dad got a scholarship. I went to school for free. Well, what about you, mom? Then she was able to share with them how she did that process. And so it's really good because, if you got 8 kids or 6 kids or 3 kids, possibly all your kids won't get a scholarship, whether it's academic, whether it's for, music or athletic. They could be straight A students, but they didn't get a full scholarship. It just bodes well when mom and dad is on the same page, delivering the same plan.
Yeah, that's great. Robert, I'm wondering if when you're dealing with a couple, they may not have kids yet, but a young couple, and let's say they both have different levels of student loan debt from college, and they have different attitudes around, what that debt means or what it's going to mean for the future. How do you help them to get on the same page so that, the future father, the future mom in that group is not, bearing, the full mental load of the stress of that college debt?
Absolutely. So for me, it always starts with radical transparency. And it's very similar to what Steven just said. And you got to share, you got to have the same plan, but you got to be 100% open on what you got and that basic, so that you can build a plan together based on the same common data set. So what's that debt? What does that look like? What are the options? And then, a family can build a plan based on their values around, are we going to rapidly pay that off? Are we going to go for loan forgiveness? Are we just going to make the minimum payments and focus on something else? But if you're not working together off a same set of the exact same data, it's not going to work. And so that's what I really strongly emphasize that couples start with. And then I also recommend you start sharing this with your kids. Now, granted, it's definitely based on age, but as your first kid gets their first little piggy bank savings account, like show that to them. And as they become teenagers, show that to them. And even more so as you're approaching this college age, like be very transparent. This is what's saved for college for you. This is what we have to spend, because there's nothing worse than this kid is applying to college and then gets a surprise. It's like, hey, mom and dad actually have no money for you. So you got to figure out how to pay this. And it could really derail some college plans. And then honestly, as families get older, I still continually say transparency is key, because they're going to find out when you die. Like, it's going to happen. And I think a lot of people ignore this fact. And so then you start having some real gaps in a skill set that could have been built over 20 or 40 years to handle and deal with certain things. And all of a sudden it comes at them with a freight train. So the more transparent you can be as a family unit, I think the better plan you can make going forward.
I love this, Robin. Before I let Michael weigh in, this is a strange panel when it comes to this, because Stephen got a scholarship to play football in college. Michael got a scholarship to UCLA as a gymnast. I was a full financial aid kid in college. My wife got a scholarship to run track at the University of Kentucky. So this is a strange panel of people who had all kinds of things happening. But Michael, back to you. When you think about, and I know you, like some of your families, your dad started in the business, and there's been this real, it's you're at Merrill Lynch, giant firm, but it's a real family feel to the practice that you run. So when you think about how probably, I'm guessing, the generations, people maybe started with your dad and are now with you and your sister and your nephew, and then they'll stay on with your nephew afterwards. How do you make sure that mom and dad and as many people as they feel comfortable are involved in the plan, so they know what is going on, so they're not like, as Robert pointed out, mom and dad are dead, and they're like, wow, mom and dad had $20 million, or oh no, mom and dad are dead, they have $2,000. What are we gonna do here? How do you get them all involved, Michael?
Yeah, I've been at Merrill 25 years, and when I first came in, what I saw a lot of, was one, and mostly the dad, and mostly the guy coming in to meet, to go over the portfolio, and now we make it instrumental, and we really, only on an exception basis, we encourage both couples to come in to go over the financial plan. Because what I've seen is, over the years is, one, there's more widows than there are widowers, and statistically, men, are statistically slated to pass away.
Way to bring us all down here, Michael. We're just on a high note here. Way to bring us all down.
What I'm saying is, and so if the spouse isn't educated, that's the first that you have to work really hard. And they're talking about stress and anxiety when you've never dealt with a subject, and now you've amassed wealth that you know nothing about. Getting them involved earlier from both spouses, we find, just makes that financial plan more successful. But when we hired Kevin, who's my nephew, who was traveling back, like I said, between New York and LA, and he was in a different career. So when we brought him in, the whole general idea was, we have clients now in their 50s or 60s who have kids who are graduating college. So he is now getting involved, and he did a panel the other day, actually with teenagers, to try and educate them, because we want now them to become educated as soon as possible. Because like you said, Paul, eventually, you talk about one of the greatest wealth transfers, that's already underway and will continue for years to come. That next generation, we might have clients that were very successful and they've amassed, $8 to $10 million, and they're passing on to kids. And those kids have very noble professions. They may be a teacher, they may be, a nurse, but they're not making the type of money that their parents had amassed. So to prepare them for, having that kind of money come to them and how to deal with that, they're not only dealing with the psychology of having lost their parents, but they're now dealing with, how am I to now deal and now I've been entrusted with this generational wealth. And this generational wealth security, there can come with that a lot of different emotions. So the earlier they can get involved with understanding what could come to them, and how to deal with that, it takes one of those emotions off the table when that wealth does come to them, and how they know how to deal with it, as they go forward.
Yeah, that's great. This has been wonderful, guys. Thank you very much for your time. We have one last question here, and I feel like poor Robert, he's been the middle child throughout. I've either started with Michael or started with Steven, and Robert, been in the middle. So Robert gets this question first, and we'll go around the horn. But, what are 3 ways that fathers can use Father's Day to evaluate their plan for themselves, but also for their family? 3 things that come to mind that, we always think of daylight savings time as the moment when you're supposed to change the battery in your smoke detector in your house. If we start instilling, Father's Day as a day when you're not just watching the final round of the US Open, but you're reflecting on what you can do financially for your family. Robert, what are 3 things that come to mind for you that you think fathers could do ahead of Father's Day?
Absolutely. I think number 1 is just getting organized or revisiting your organization and make sure it's up to date. Check your app, check your accounts, sit around and make sure everything, you know what's going on. And then number 2, I would say, this is the harder one, I think, for most dads, but ask yourself if what you see on that organizational plan actually aligns with what you value. And what I mean by that is, like, if you say you value spending time with your family, are those expenses like skewed to things that involve your family, or are they skewed to things that don't? And, with that being said, number 3 is sit down with your spouse, significant other, or kids, and maybe take an action that moves that equation more towards what you value. So maybe you're going to try something different. You're going to do something different, spend your money a little bit different way, cut some expenses. that's on you. It's what you value, but ask yourself, get organized, check your values, and then maybe take a small step towards aligning it better.
I like that, but yeah, in that ledger there, I've got youngish kids. Can I put like red wine in that ledger for spending time with my family? Is that
I
okay?
don't see why
By the
not.
way you're doing,
Yeah.
I like the way you do your
100%.
accounting here, Robert. I like this a lot.
Allocating resources.
Allocating
Yep.
resources. All right, Stephen, I'll go to you next. When you think of three things that fathers can use Father's Day for, as that, like I said, that sort of reminder of like, okay, it's Father's Day. Let me make sure these three things in my plan, or these things for my family, or these things for myself are aligned. What are three things that come to mind for you?
That's good. That's good. Three things that come to mind for me. You have to be true to, my opinion, who you are. Sometimes as dads, especially young dads, they get stuck in trying to be like another dad, but that's not their skill set or that's not their gifts. I get it. But when it comes to understanding exactly who you are, and so I always start with, all right, who am I? And it's Father's Day. I love blessing others. So one, I'm going to say, hey, I know it's Father's Day and you guys are supposed to be giving me a lot of love and gifts on whatever you feel as though my love language is. But I want to bless you guys. We're doing X today. Don't want to mess up your plans, but if you allow me, I want to do X with the family today on Father's Day. So that's one. And that could be, hey, we're going to the movies together as a family. Because sometimes families get caught viewing dad as, oh, he's going to say we can't do it because we got to save. And when it comes to this topic, we're talking about financial stress and things of that nature. So throw them a curveball. They're thinking like, hey, it's Father's Day. It's all about him. But no, who I am, I'm going to bless you guys. We're going to a family movie or something like that. Something for them. That's one. Number two is ask them what's important to you, and you can do it together as a group or obviously one on one. Today is Father's Day, and I really appreciate it and all the love. But I want to ask you guys because I want to make sure I'm on track to doing the things that I do as a father and my responsibility. What's important to you? Is your number one priority still A? Like an A could be, I want to play AAU baseball. Is that still your number one priority? Just go down the list in the family. Where are we at with your deal? What's your number one priority? And then the third one is for me, what can I do to make my job easier? When you're a dad, it's all about your family. It's all about your wife. How can you take care of your wife and be a blessing and what she needs and make sure your husband list is checked off and all your kids are happy. And okay, well, how can you make your job easier? And for me, is you're never going to get in trouble as a dad by saving too much. Oh, dad, going in, I save too much. No, you're not. You're not. So for me, I'm thinking, how can I make my job easy? What can I sacrifice? I got the whole car I always wanted out of the way before I had a big family and a bunch of kids. So I don't need a 911.
See, that was a benefit of an NFL signing bonus back in the day. You could just go, okay, you no kids, your college girlfriend, buy the fancy car. Now it's done.
You're right, but you know what? It's all about sacrifice. I was willing in college to You don't know how many of my buddies hung out and had fun on Saturdays because all the work Monday through Friday up at the stadium was done. They'd be like, oh man, this is crazy. He works out Saturdays. Now in 2023, they see why I was working out on Saturdays. It pays off. So as a dad, always find an extra target of where you could sacrifice to make your job easier.
Yep, I love it. I love it. Michael, last one to you. We got, 6 pretty good ones so far. So you're going to round us out with 3 of your own that fathers need to bear in mind or use Father's Day.
Well, it's tough going last if, some of them have already been taken, but, I can be boring and say things like, check your beneficiary designations and, make sure from a technical perspective, you're maxing out your retirement plan and all that kind of thing. But I like Stephen Roberts' answers much better. And I think, making sure that you're, your values and where where your money is going. And like Steve said, you take a moment as a dad for self-care, as you're doing all the right things and you're thinking about your kids and you're thinking about your wife, from time to time, you do need to reward yourself. from that perspective. And you take the blessings that your family give you on that day, and you enjoy them, and you enjoy the time, that you have with them, because I think that those are much better answers than technical answers in terms of what you can do on Father's Day. That could be much more boring.
And I'm just really proud of you, Michael. I've on the guys on this call, I've known you the longest, and I know that your very first car, your parents were horrible to you. Your very first car was a light blue minivan with wood panels on it. And so,
Yeah.
Stephen,
Good
for
stuff.
Michael, he's got a much better car now than he did
Yeah.
he did back then. He's gone the other way. So I don't know if you're driving a minivan. I'm not going to minivan shame anybody here. This is all positive, but guys.
Wait. Since you're in the car, you gotta let me tell you this quick 1-minute story, real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm a junior in high school, and just like everybody on the panel, we had high school jobs and you save your money. And I had, I think to be exact, about $480 saved up. And I took my dad around the corner to show him this car that was for sale. And I said, hey, if you can spot me some of the money, I can pay you back. It was a 1974 E, like 320 or 280 or 240. They wanted like $1,200 for it. And my dad said, hey, I could spot you this money, but the problem is if it breaks down, I can't afford to fix a Mercedes. And I said, all right, Dad, I appreciate it. He said, why don't you just get a Buick Regal or something? You can get one of those for like $600, $800. And I'm like, nah, that's all right, Dad. I appreciate it. If I can't get what I want, I'm just going to wait till I can. I'm just going to work hard and wait till I can. And you know what? I didn't. I never had a car in high school. I just drove my mom's Cadillac. I kept my mom's car clean. So now fast forward in college, it's time where I'm about to get drafted. And I said, man, it took longer than I want, but that time is here. I am not buying a 1974 E240. I didn't do it. So anyway, and I used it for motivation. I said, you know what? I'm just going to work hard, and I'm not going to just get anything. I'm just going to buy. I'm going to wait until I can afford what I really want, and I'm willing to put the work in. And so I share those stories with my kids, and they laugh.
So when you got drafted, you bought the Buick then, Stephen? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I did not. It was 1992. I bought a 1992 BMW 535i, and boy, was I happy.
That is a great place to end. I want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank my guests for being on today. I've learned a lot. I appreciate you guys chatting with me. It's just been amazing. We'll have another panel next week going live on YouTube, more strategies and resources for dads. If you want to get more involved with Fathering Together or Father's Friday or anything else, you can send an email to info@fatheringtogether.org. If you want to learn more about the Company of Dads, just go to thecompanyofdads.com and look us up. And of course, all of the contact information for Robert, Stephen, and Michael will be on there. So just remember one last thing. Our goal with this whole series is to help you be emotionally courageous, connected, and committed to those who matter most in your life. Thank you for listening. And guys, thanks for being part of this. It was awesome.